One Quick Point, the podcast focused on unpacking life. I'm James Walker, your host. On this episode, I'm joined by a very good friend, Josh Porter. I've known him for, 15 years now. And we have been through some things, much of which we go through in this podcast. When I thought about One Quick Point and how I wanted to start this journey of really unpacking life and the themes surrounding what many of us go through as we go on this collective journey, friendship was one that I knew I wanted to go through, and there really isn't a better person that I could dig into it with Josh because of the things that we've seen and we talked about, like marriage, adoption, divorce, loss, death. There's a lot that I've experienced in those past 15 years, and he's been right there for much of it. So we have a really open, honest conversation around those themes, and I wanted to share this with you, and hopefully it'll give you a nice reflection point of something that you'll see in your own friendship. One thing I do want to call out is that this is a two-parter. It didn't start out that way. That wasn't the plan. But I want to start every episode of One Quick Point with what I'm calling origin stories, things that allow us to really understand who we are and how the childhoods we've had or the other things that we've experienced throughout life, maybe how they shape our current perspective. And the origin story of Josh and I, we started going back and forth, and it was some really rich conversation. So I ended up splitting the podcast into two. So this first part is much of our origin story and leads up into the bridge on One Quick Point on friendship, but that'll be part two. So hopefully you'll join us for the ride. I won't say much more. Let's jump in. One Quick Point on friendship, part one, the origin stories. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and sharing this conversation about friendship.
Sure.
When I think about One Quick Point in the podcast, I had a few people I had to reach out to. And I was like, ooh, should I pull him in? And so I'm happy you accepted the invitation. When we think about the conversation about friendship, I want to make sure that every episode starts with something about origin stories. So I really want to understand who you are. So if we start there, who is Joshua?
So Joshua is... So I was adopted when I was 1 year old, and that changed the trajectory of my life. My birth parents, they were in a very unique situation that my adopted parents kind of came in and saved me from, and that changed the trajectory of my life, which then I began to have this relationship with, really with God, and the understanding that everything's going to work out and that everything works out in my favor, because if He did it then when I was a baby, like He'll do it every time. And so Joshua is an intelligent, handsome man of faith, and one who's always wanted to impact people's lives in a positive way.
And where are you from?
Woodbridge, Virginia, but I was born in PG County. Raised in Woodbridge, Del City, still in the DMV area to this day. Alexandria is where I call home now, and it's about 30 minutes from where I grew up. But the difference is night and day, right? It's suburb versus city, and I love Woodbridge and the suburbs, but you know me. I like to be in the mix.
You need to be in and of the people.
Yes.
Okay. So one thing to think about your origin, who you are, all of that, where you're from. There's a separate origin story that we kind of all bring together. And where are your people from? Because sometimes our story is ours, and sometimes it's the continuation of other stories and the extension of the other stories of the people around us. So where are your people from?
So this has always been an interesting question that I've asked myself, and I hear others give their answers, they have a really strong connection to where their ancestors came from, where their grandparents came from, where their parents grew up. And while I do have that connection with my adopted parents, my mom is from Jackson, Mississippi. My dad's from Baltimore, Maryland. Um, and even like those two different worlds
Very
come
different
together,
worlds.
country, city, north, south, to come together and create this beautiful unit, this beautiful family that I do love dearly. There's still a part of me that I can say that to an extent I'm still searching for where my people are from, and there is a small percentage of my identity that I am still in search of because I was adopted. And not to get too heavy.
Hey, no, we're here. We're here. Literally, we are unpacking life and the things that we're grappling with as we grow. And part of it, I'm one of those people of the deep ancestry and thinking of things. Even I did ancestry at one point in time, and I was like, okay, because I'm trying to figure out some things. 50-50 on the story that came back. I'm like, oh, is this the story?
Yeah.
But even as you're mentioning this now, as we think about friendship, and we'll get more into it, we didn't even known each other for years before I knew you were adopted. To me, and I mean, it makes sense given the fact that you were adopted at one, that your family unit is your family unit. That's the unit you know.
Yeah.
And so, not having sat in your seat and been in your shoes, I feel like if it was reversed, I'd feel like, okay, these are my people, so their story is my story. But I understand that there's another story that you don't know about. And is that something you would ever really explore through a service or in another means?
Yes. So my adopted parents, I will say, in my family, because I have a younger brother and an older sister, they've never made me feel adopted. So I've always felt a part of the family, right? And then as I got older, I began to hear other people's origin stories. And while I do have mine from my adopted parents, my origin story is still came into question. Actually, at the beginning of the pandemic, I did do an Ancestry.com search. And I got pretty deep in the connection to the point where, like, I was on the phone with someone who's like 1 degree separated from me, and she.
So wait, was that a cousin, or was it 1 degree from your birth parents?
It was 1 degree from my birth parents. So I think it could have been an aunt, like to me.
Okay.
So maybe my parents' sister, and reached out to her, and we began to talk. And then, as I'm giving her information, I could hear and feel her shutting down. And then, I gave her like birthplace, birth date.
So, you feel like, okay, maybe I was getting close to an uncomfortable place for her.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so she shut down the conversation.
Okay.
Pretty quickly.
Got very close.
And when that happened, I kind of decided to pause the search and
put that in a box for a bit.
Yes, to put it back in the box, right?
Right.
Because when I was a child, my mom offered to help me find out more information. I was like, no, you guys are great. But what I have held on to as an adult is that I have the opportunity to create my own story through my own family, right?
Right.
So I have the opportunity to have kids or and start that family story from scratch almost.
And you can be the full architect, how it shapes and how it grows.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because when I was thinking about it, so both of my parents have passed, and I think about it sometimes. I watch a little bit too much of Henry Louis Gates and Finding Your Roots,
Mm-hmm.
and that would be a dream. I'm like, I would like him or somebody he verifies to be the genealogist, because I have, West Indian family. We have people all over New York and the Caribbean and England and Canada and all the places people gather. And so you hear lots about the history, but then it's largely stories. And so I did my ancestry search, and a couple of my cousins that I know, first cousins, popped up. So I'm like, okay, there's some legitimacy here. But then some of the story wasn't always there. Like I had heard that my great-grandfather was this white Irishman and all of that, and thinking it, and came back and it was like, I think it was like 3% white. I was like, wait a minute, that's not that far off in the chain, and what does that mean? And I've heard and read the studies about people feeling different ways about the service and the validity of the percentages and all that. But what I was searching for and hoping for was there a connection that would lead to a chain that I didn't know about?
Yeah.
Or past, I know the Grenada history to a point, and can get a little bit past my great-grandparents. My great-grandfather on my mother's side went to Panama, helped build the Panama Canal. And, West Indian people, folklore, all kinds of things. People have kids, all kinds of places. I'm like, do we have family there? Are there roots in other places?
Yeah.
They were there long enough such that, my great aunt was born there and then went back to Grenada. And so I just think about the origin of the stories really interestingly, and I think I agree with you. The story can be whatever the story is, but the story you carry forward can be whatever you want it to be and however you shape it. I even think about how much of my story was based in being in New York in this like Caribbean cocoon of Brooklyn,
Mm-hmm.
and how much my kids, they're not having that. That's so far from it. Even if I were to take them there, it's not the same.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you get into the generations of things.
Well, let me ask you this, because your father passed when you were young.
Yeah, 11.
Do you or have people called out, when they see him and you?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is two part, and I'm asking this because so with my adopted family, my brother and my dad are just alike.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm similar, like just because we grew up in the same house.
Right, you're going to pick up some of the mannerisms
Mm-hmm.
and perspectives.
But there is still a part of me that's very different.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother's almost identical. And sometimes I am like, well, who am I like? Like, who?
Yeah, what is that? It's a challenge, right? Because so my father died when I was 11. So I had some of those very, very early years. But my mother was such a heavy hand in the raising. And so it's like I spent so much time with her. She was a teacher. I went to school across the street from where she taught. Like, so she brought me to and from home. So we spent all the time together. We went on trips, and my dad was not a vacationer and all that. It's like when we went places, like it's usually me, her, our cousins, like aunts, other people. So the interactions that I had with him were very specific. It was like him driving around in his car. He loves sports cars and cars in general. Listening to the music, like this Bob Marley movie is coming out. I'm like, I gotta see this because I grew up hearing every single song, not just the popular ones, like the records played start to finish.
Yeah.
And I laugh now when I get in the car and the kids are like, well, they want to hear it. And I'm like, you're trying to tell me what you want to hear. I did not have these flexible choices.
Yeah.
I remember, you're a little kid, Saturday morning, I had a little Nintendo, I'm out there playing, and I have my music, and like, he just come and turn on the music, like, hey, this is my house.
So those are the things that I have from it. So people aren't really gonna be able to point out a whole lot. And I'm way closer to my mother's family than my father's family too.
Okay.
So they're gonna be able to point out a whole lot of like, oh, you're just like him in this way. And with my mother passing, it's like, all right, well, she would be the one that would be able to kind of make the connections most readily.
Yeah.
So what I have heard, and I started to hear it in my teenage years, when I was little, everybody said I looked like my mother, family, everything. And I turned probably 13, 14, and they started to see more of him come in. The way I might smile, some of my expressions, they're like, oh, that's Mr. Walker is what they used to say. And so that part was interesting because I can see some of it, but I don't have the things to bounce off of. What I know that's different is interesting is I think about how I navigate emotions. And now I'm growing up and being of a certain age. It's like, okay, so I'm the man now. I have a family now. I have different things.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, my reactions to certain situations, I sometimes catch myself. I'm like, oh, that is like how he would have reacted. That is some of what he might have said or felt.
Okay.
Maybe not what he said, maybe what he felt.
Yeah.
And so that is interesting. As we grow, I could see and almost feel you on the connection of like, okay, what am I laddering to? Because as I'm entering, like both of them died before I had kids. So it's just like, all right, now, so as I enter this phase and stage, I don't have anybody to bounce that off of like, well, what was it like then?
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think to a certain extent, to a lot of extent, because you were adopted very early, you have that with your parents. But I feel you on the like, okay, is there something I can align to? And then two, when I think about it, I think about sometimes his death in the framing of my age, but I've started to recently think about his death in the framing of his. And so it's like, all right, so I'm in my late 30s. I'm like, late 30s. He died when he was 42, 43.
Okay.
So I'm like, oh, we're approaching that time frame.
Yeah.
And so there's even a point where it will stop, where I won't have any context.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know who you were as a 50, 60, 70-year-old.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, when I'm like that, I'm like, interesting. So I feel you on like, okay, as you're trying to bounce off and compare, you don't have that.
Yeah, and just what I'm naturally, what I gravitate toward, as a man, and from the people I date or the goals I set, right? They're very big, and sometimes I do wonder like where I get that from.
I'm gonna say this though. Knowing you, it wouldn't have mattered. There's things I believe in people and purpose and things that are just like innate. There's paths that people have to be on. Your personality even is just like you really want, and you said to yourself, you need to be in and of the people. I think part of who you are is pulling off of and bouncing off of the other people around you. So you kind of moving like, oh, I'm going to be in the city, I'm going to do this. You're going to get the city sensibilities. You're going to get the city energy, the city ambition. You're going to get all those things from the people that you experience, whether or not they're in your close circle. And you're going to see things and reach for things just because you're like, oh, that looks good. I'm going to go do that.
Yeah.
That's in personality. I have family that they're good in New York. They're never going to go anywhere else. They're never going to do anything. I got an adventurous spirit. And perhaps my parents had that spirit but didn't get to fulfill it. In some ways, I think I definitely saw my mom have that. She was a traveler. She wanted to go see and do things. But on a certain scale.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, early, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to Asia. I'm going here. I'm going here. Yeah. I don't know anybody. I'm just going. Yeah. Nobody that I know really has that, except, honestly, I have a cousin in the Air Force. Was in the Air Force. He's a vet now. He went and saw the world. And he did so many things that I'm just like, that was amazing. I don't even know if he realizes it of himself, that there's all that he's done, but it's just so cool. And I feel like if I were to kind of compare it to my parents, like, they didn't do that. And so now if I wonder, okay, at this stage, if they were alive today, would they be doing that? Like, I'm at home, they don't have to take care of me, they don't have to, financially support me. Would they be doing that? I don't know.
Yeah.
My gut says not really.
Yeah.
But so when you think about the comparisons, once again, I think there's a lot in you that's just like in you, and you can be different in ways that your parents wouldn't even expect.
Yeah, that's a good point because I as an adult, I gravitated toward friends like you who go after it, and that's just my circle.
Mm-hmm. I have been told sometimes that I would do better to be more content, and it's not to say to limit your goals or ambition, but to like be better able to enjoy where you are and what's in front of you. And I enjoy it, but it's like the goalpost moves a lot for me.
Yeah.
And it also, I think the adventure spirit also feeds into that too. It's like I can enjoy things for a period, for a time, and then I'm like, okay, what's the next thing?
Yeah.
Even if it's maybe returning back to a place I was, it's like I need to refresh and move. So I think that's just something interesting and something I'm thinking about a lot. This balance between contentment and ambition and other things. But we're here to talk about friendship, and I want to finish hearing about your story. So as I think about it, so in the journey from where you were growing up in Woodbridge, Dale City, to now, what phase or stage do you think was the most impactful in shaping who you are?
It's interesting because I was at a dinner for our friend Brian's wife for her birthday last year, and this almost the same question came up, like what was the thing that impacted your life the most, and something like that, and we went around, and I paused for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know if I wanted to get this deep at dinner, but and I'm pausing now because I'm thinking about.
Hey, make your choices. This is proof. This is not pre-scripted. I have questions I have in my head, but you know.
So he and this was So we knew each other at the time because we were double dating with your now wife. But I went through a divorce, and I got married at a very early age. I was 21, got divorced at 25. And that divorce shattered a lot of my life. At the time, I was working in school, building a company, married, volunteering at church a lot, like leading different groups at church, hanging out with friends, having fun. And then the divorce happened, and it kind of shattered all of that. And it forced me to rebuild. And taught me a lot throughout the process about people, about women, and about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people have gone through that process, that have gone through divorces, and it kind of spiraled them in a direction that they haven't been able to come back from. And that showed me that I can rebuild and become new and evolve, especially in my faith. Like, I never turned away from God. I never thought he didn't exist. But I did have the questions of, like, why?
Why are you going through this?
Yeah, like, why me? Like, God, like, I got married, and I did the right thing. I thought you were going to protect this and bless this, and what's going on. But we're humans, too.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's things that we have to move on from. But at 25, 26, like I'll give you an example. We'll go deep. Um, so self help. Like I've always been a self help guy, motivational. Let's go. Let's go. You want to go? Let's go. Right. um, uh, from like teenage, like I was reading, Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar and all that stuff, and so that's how I saw life and saw the world.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, I didn't believe depression existed. I was like, you just got to think differently. You just got to do better. You just got to go. Let's go get it. Like if we start today, tomorrow you'll feel better because of the progress you made yesterday. Like let's go. Come on. Then I got divorced, and I went through about 6 months of like depression, like legit. Like the only thing I did was I went to work.
Yeah.
Right? And even then, like I was like taking sick days and all this stuff, and my work was impacted in that way. But it was work, home, and just in my bedroom, like in the dark, just sitting there,
just trying to figure out what is going on right now.
listening to Prince.
How do you feel about it?
Yeah,
Listening to Prince.
Purple Rain.
Purple Rain. Okay, so that's always going to have a special place.
Yes.
All right, so that's something we share then, though, because I definitely have songs where there's like places in moments in time where that song is symbolic of what I was going through. Not necessarily the words and the meaning, but that was the song at the time that was playing. I'm sorry you had to go through that, especially at that age. Having lived some life, I'm like at 25, 26, I didn't have the awareness, the maturity to try to navigate something like that. But I've learned through some other things that I've gone through that you do what you have to, and you find the best way through that you can. So I'm glad to know that you have come through the other side. And what I want to ask about now is, just as we think about themes in life, what gives you energy? What's the thing that today, in this point in time, energizes you?
So pre-therapy, like I didn't really understand it at the time, but I was like a people pleaser, right?
Mm.
So seeing someone happy, seeing someone excited because I did something or I added value or I helped them reach a goal or I, had a conversation that impacted them in a positive way, their reaction would give me energy. Post therapy, after working through all that, I understand that it's not their reaction that gives me energy, but it's the doing. It's the
So you want to be in service.
Yes. So it's serving, it's helping, it's in the conversation, it's in the rolling up my sleeves and helping someone do something. That is what energizes me. Like that's what gets me up every day.
Okay. And related but different, what gives you peace?
Whew. Peace. It's knowing that everything's going to work out.
Okay.
Right. For my good. Right. It's in knowing that no matter what happens, no matter what decision I make, it's all going to work out. Right. So that gives me peace at work. It gives me peace with my friends. It gives me peace in relationships, right? And it also gives me power to make the decisions that I want to make, and not making decisions for other people. But yeah, I go to bed easy, knowing that tomorrow's already taken care of. Right? Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing your origin story. So we're gonna take a break and then we're gonna bring it up. We're gonna talk about friendship.
Well, I want to know what gives you.
It's asking me the questions. It's asking me the questions. All right. So I'll answer that one. So my first thought about what gives me peace is that if life were to be over today, I've done a lot of good things that I enjoyed.
Yep.
And I would be ready with the assumption that I would go to heaven with a list of questions to ask God. Like, ready to go. I'm like, all right, so please explain these 17 things, and then I have a whole other list, but like that could be conversation part 2. Like, that's a real thing where I'm like, all right, some people hope for afterlife for all kinds of reasons. I want the afterlife for a few specific reasons. I would love for there to be a greater power that is validated, that is in fact running the show, that I can ask, how and why do you do certain things? Because I just want to understand why it works the way it works. And if there's a job where I get to come back and like play and do different things, I would love to come back with the knowledge that I have from this life and just run amok. Just knowing that certain things matter and certain things don't. But it gives me peace in that I really try, and it's more intentional now. And I think it has to do with my parents passing and like thinking about the age of where you are and how life is limited and all those things, of trying to be intentional about having experiences that I enjoy and trying to avoid the ones I don't. There's still things that I do now that I feel like, all right, I have to do this or I have to do that. And I'm working on not feeling as connected or committed to those things, but I am very intentional about including and creating the things that give me joy and trying to, actively chase those opportunities or those experiences. And so that's what gives me peace. It's like, all right, even last night I was kind of flipping through some of the Instagram photos I posted. And I was like, oh, I've done some good things in the last couple of years that I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And I remember that what I get the peace from is doing the thing, but having the autonomy. And that's a beautiful thing that I think not everybody had. I don't think my parents had the same autonomy to see something, want something, go after it, secure it, experience it.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, I have some agency to do those things. And so doing that again and again and again gives me the peace of like, all right, we don't know how long we're here, but for the period that we're here, I got to do some of the things I wanted. And I'm going to keep chasing more.
Yeah. I remember when you graduated from NYU, I was like, James keeps getting bigger. Like,
literally figurative.
No.
I'm going to get back in the gym.
No. But I mean, COVID did a number on us.
Everybody.
But like you kept growing. It's like your cup overflowed, and then you just got a bigger cup. And then when you had kids and moved back down here to DC, like your house, like it's like James keeps growing.
Yeah, my eyes keep getting bigger. The plans get bigger.
Yeah.
And I mean, some of that's just naturally part of me. I've been extremely blessed. I have not hit some of the hurdles that I know a lot of people hit. And it's not of their own fault. Like, so, my questions about like, well, why does this work the way it works? Sometimes I want to understand why some people get the fast track. Some people got to jump the hurdles before they can do it. Some people just can't run the race. But the other thing is, I don't know. I'm really like, I really think and plan. And if I could will it, I would, for a lot of things. And that's what it gives me the peace to know, okay, there's been some success in the scale of, I tried to get it and I did get it in many categories. And so I know that, if this thing were to wrap up, all right, I have my joy. And now it's like, all right, so what other joy can we get? To your point.
Yeah. So how, with you getting bigger cups, you also have 2 kids. How are you instilling that will into them?
Oh,
because
I mean,
like you said, it's personality, but there's a bit like you are who you are because your mom did instill some things to complement your personality and your will and your drive. How are you doing that with your kids?
I will say I'm not doing a ton right now because of the fact that they have such big personalities that I wouldn't have expected. Okay. But these are so this is the point when you're talking about, okay, how can I bounce off of family or people? These would be some of the questions I would ask my mom. Like, what was I really like? Like, I see the pictures, I have my memories. Yeah. What was your perspective kind of being like, oh, this is different? And I know I had a distinct personality as a child. But, I mean, my daughter is just like burst of energy from the beginning. And there's things she likes, there's things she doesn't like. She's going to tell you, she tells other people. And there's a busyness with her. Yeah. And I think I have some of it. So your point about like, what am I instilling? Right now I'm trying to see who they are. They're showing me who they are. My son, lots of energy in a completely different direction. Okay. They're good friends right now, and I'm an only child. So this whole idea about like sibling rivalries and connections, and one minute they love each other, the next minute they're fighting over little stuff. Who took what toy? Apparently I've been told, like, buckle up, that's going to be it until they're, like, in like 19, 20, and then they'll figure out what their relationship is with each other outside of that. But I'm not doing a whole lot right now. Okay. I'm trying to shape and, make sure that, like, okay, you're contextualizing the world, but they're both extremely smart. They ask a lot of questions. They'll try to run the show if you let them. So I feel like, all right, I can feel the dominance, the experience, the interest, the passion for just everything. So I'm enjoying that part of it. They drain you of energy. So when you talk about cups, I've had to learn in a different way with kids that it almost doesn't matter what's going on with you. You got to give them what they need at that time. Yeah. And that means that you got to be thoughtful about what you save for them in terms of energy in that cup. Same thing with relationships. Same thing with my wife. And early in my relationship, I didn't necessarily have all that awareness of like measuring energy. But I think that's also part of being young. When you're really young, you're in your 20s, you don't get up when you want, go to work. You, like that's your main thing. I have to go to work for X amount of hours, and then I can then do the rest from wherever. And it's like, go to work, go to happy hour. Yeah. Go to work, go to dinner, go to work, go to the concert, go to work, go to the club. And so you had a lot of energy. Yeah. And you could spend it in a bunch of ways. I'm like, no, okay, married, getting older, got kids. Like, now everything requires a level of thought and planning that I didn't necessarily think about. Yeah. But I'm still figuring out, okay, what's the way to do it for me? And funny enough, I'm in a way like portioning out my cup and thinking about, oh wait, I got to make sure I got to save it for me. Yeah. So that's a little bit different.
Yeah, there's definitely the recharge.
Oh, let me be clear. There's the recharge, but there's like fun for me.
You're like recharge, but also I actively do.
Yes, what are the things that I like to do? I still have that only child sensibility, and so sometimes I need to be by myself, only child, and introvert.
Yes, yeah, you are an interesting.
I'll be out there for my period of time, and then I'm like, oh, I'm in the cocoon. I'm happy. I'm good with everybody. Yeah. But just let me be in here, and I'm probably going to be doing something like related to art and culture. I'm going to read a book, listen to a podcast, watch a movie, and I'll be totally fine doing it by myself. And then I come back out in the world, and I'm good. But those are things that also give me peace. So I kind of gave you the very high, what gives you peace, but those types of things give me peace too. Good stories, real conversations, and just seeing and understanding a little bit of the world.